Hello, welcome awesome class to the second part of our designing functional fundraising and financing strategies, principally for the non-profit, social enterprise and public management organizations in Sub-Sahara Africa. Sub-Sahara Africa, we need to catch up with the rest of the world in many respects. This, of course, is our own contribution to the process of making the subcontinent, to become a destination of choice, destination of travel, investments, and the rest, like, which will cumulatively lift GDP to world standards as much as possible. At the first class, we talked very closely to the issues of the requirements or the necessities of having strategic fundraising and financing plans in our various organizations. We need that in order not to operate on an ad hoc basis. We need that in order not to, we need our strategy plans, particularly our fundraising and financing strategy plans, so that we operate on a very consistent and perpetual basis, as the case may be. And I said earlier on in the first class that we require to put in place a minimum of between 5 to 10 years fundraising and financing strategy plans, alongside other strategy plans in the organization, which cumulatively will take the organization to its desired objectives, its the fulfillment of its goals, and of course meeting up with its vision as prescribed by the founders of the organizations. I want to talk very briefly about the disadvantages of having a poorly crafted strategic plan. We'll start that as one segment in this class before we go on to the other segments. Now, in this particular segment, I want you to, have a clear understanding that when we don't have a functional fundraising and financing strategy for our organizations, and here we're talking about the non-profit and social enterprise organizations in Sub-Sahara Africa, what you will observe is that we're going to lack a clear and defined direction as an organization or as an institution. You could be a school, you could be a university, or a health institution, which is funded by donors, and you're non-profit for that matter. You must have this plan in place so that you can have a clear and defined direction. Now, when you don't have your properly designed functional fundraising and financing strategy plan, what you would observe is that some of the projects you try to run will fail because they are not supported by adequate funding and financing strategies to enhance and to provide a resource level, financial resource level, and sometimes resource levels in kind that are required to ensure that the project succeed. You also have, as one of the disadvantages, a third one I will say here, are budget inconsistencies. Sometimes your budgets just go out of gear because they either, and in most cases they underperform because they have not been put in place a very clear direction, a very clear strategy direction of inflow of resources, inflow of funding, inflow of finance, financing, as the case may be. When these are not in place, it's very likely that you're going to have a lot of budget inconsistencies. On the fourth side, I also want to indicate that when you don't have a proper strategy plan in place, or if you have a poorly crafted one, which is virtually the same thing, what you would have is that you will have poor communication across stakeholders. When communication is not efficient and adequate across the organization and spreading across the stakeholders, the result is that projects fail. The result is that projects become more or less challenged, and in the long run, the quality of service given by the organization or provided by the organization begins to flounder, and in a short space of time, that organization might stop to exist. When you don't, and on the last hand, which is the fifth, I would say here that if you don't have a properly crafted strategy plan, what you're going to see in your organization is that you might have an excessive change in strategic priorities. Your priorities might begin to change, based on the vagaries of the economy, the vagaries of climate, or the environment for that matter. Your strategy plan would necessarily do a SWOT analysis of your entire process, and that would inform you sufficiently about your areas of strength, your areas of weaknesses, your areas of opportunities, and the relevant threats in your environment or in your sphere of work. So that brings us to a very clear understanding that now we need to have properly crafted strategy plans, 5 to 10 year strategy plans for all our non-profit, social enterprise, public management organizations, across Sub-Sahara Africa. In just a moment, we would also want to, continue, by stating that skills in strategic planning are critical to the long-term success of your non-profit or social enterprise organization. This form of planning would include, taking a wide look around at what's going on outside your non-profit or social enterprise organization and how it might affect the organization, which basically is an environmental scan, and identifying opportunities and threats. We've talked about that a few minutes ago, where we said your strategic priorities might change very regularly if you don't have an adequate strategy plan in place. An adequate strategy plan in this particular instance, we're talking about the fundraising and the financing strategy plan for your organization. You can also take a hard look at what's going on, inside the organization, including your strengths and weaknesses. We mentioned that earlier. And what it also helps you to do is establishing your statements of mission, vision, and values. This is ideally the first step in going ahead to develop a strategic fundraising and financing plan. So let's keep our attention on the fact that we are looking for how to get funding and to get the required financing instruments in place to assist our organizations to succeed. What your strategy plan, the skills in strategic planning, they're quite critical to the long-term success of your organization, because it will also help you to establish your goals, which you normally would accomplish over 3 to 5 years or more. And this would also further help you identify, how those goals will be reached via the strategies, objectives, and the rest of it. So we need properly crafted strategy plans, and in this case, fundraising and financing, to be able to, clearly put in place how your non-profit will attain to its set objectives, and goals. Now, let's look at the components of, what a strategic plan would ordinarily be like. First, you're going to have what you call your executive summary. Your executive summary is, more or less like a picture, but condensed into one page of your entire strategy plan. So it's a wonderful summary. Like I said, it's a picture for one page. As much as is possible, no matter how long your document is, endeavor to condense it to one page as the executive summary. That is where you will either gain or lose your potential funders or financiers or helpers or sympathizers, as the case will be. So ensure that your executive summary has sufficient information to more or less hold the attention of your would-be financier or funder. And after that, you must have a section which, after your executive summary, which should clearly indicate, the content of your board. That is your board of directors. Who makes up your board, and just a little bio under the respective names. Then, of course, your senior management team and your staff. All these, must be clearly indicated in the next section. As soon as your potential funder or financier gets to read your executive summary, assuming you have to share it with them, or your stakeholders for that matter, the next thing that comes to mind, the next rational thing that comes to mind is who will undertake this process for this organization. So it's at that point that you want to assure your stakeholders that whoever you're bringing on board as a member of the board, as a member of management, as a member of staff of the organization, are capable of delivering on their given mandate. So in the third section, I would advise that you talk about your organization background. It's good to know what led to the forming of your non-profit, what led to the setting up of your school, the setup of your school, pardon me. You also have to indicate, what led to the setup, of whatever social enterprise or non-profit organization, for which you are seeking funding, on a long-term basis, on a medium-term and long-term basis. All right. So you need to talk about, how you arrived at that point. Then talk about, and for your organization background, of course, that will not be divorced from the promoters and the founders. The promoters and the founders, to a very large extent, have, a lot to tell about the organization background. Now, the fourth section I would advise is a section which is clearly given to explaining the vision of the organization. Because what your vision will do for you is that it will articulate a desired future for your organization. If you want to see all the children of school-going age in school in Sub-Sahara Africa, it's wonderful, to, write that out clearly, and take note. It is your desired future for your organization. It is the desired future for the founders of the organization. And from generation to generation, effort will be made, to ensure that this vision is attained to. But the good thing about life is that, society is very dynamic. Changes happen, all the time, and population increases. So what that means essentially is that your vision you continue to keep your vision in pursuit. You will continue to pursue after your vision, because what you will observe is that from time and time again, because of the dynamics of society and changes of society, you will see, quite some variations. So your mission, which is the next, I would advise after your vision, That is what will define where the organization is going now, and basically describing the purpose and why this organization exists. So your mission statement, should always be about where the organization is going now in the present, and you need to describe the purpose in the statement, and also state to a very large extent why the organization, exists. All right. Now, the next area to make, a proper fundraising strategic plan, I will say to you, is that the next section become the objectives, and in your objectives, please refer to specific measurable ends and the specific targets or standards against which actual performance can be measured. What we're talking about is that you need to be specific as to, the kind of funding you want, the kind of financing you want, how much you want to go out for, and in most cases, the potential sources of those funds. It must be clearly stated, clearly indicated, clearly enumerated, to the extent that anyone coming, to see your strategic plan, or to whom, you make it available, they will be able to, easily work with you to, the attainment of those objectives. And then, of course, your values, which describe the core ethics or principles which your organization will abide by no matter what. That is what it's all about. Your values are, the principles, the principles, the guidelines that your organization intends to abide by, no matter what happens. Those are your values. Of course, then you have to enumerate clearly your programs. Your programs, now after your values, will of course become a set of related measures or activities with a particular long-term aim. This, is actually tied to your objectives. All right. So your program would necessarily, encompass in what your objectives are. Your strategic analysis, this is another component of your strategic plan. For your strategic analysis, this refers to the process of conducting research on an organization and its operating environment to formulate a strategy. There must be sufficient, what you might call, research to be undertaken in respect of the environment, in respect of the target areas, the issues at hand. And then another component of your strategic plan, is that your plan must have goals and strategies. And that goal is defined as a result which, your organization plans to accomplish, while the strategy is defined as the method by which the goal is achieved. So, your goal is the result that your non-profit, your social enterprise wants to attain to, what you want to accomplish, while the strategy is the method by which that goal is achieved. So, what is your goal? You intend to raise a particular amount of money on a yearly basis to support to fund or to finance your non-profit or social enterprise organization. At the same time, you need to develop the strategy to attain onto that goal. And then, last but not the least, you need to have, an evaluation process. Now, what's an evaluation process? This involves more or less analyzing your strategic plan and assessing how well you've done against achieving the goals in your strategy. So this actually comes along with interim monitoring and then periodic evaluation, which also comes up at the end of each project cycle. That, basically would inform whether or not you have done well in your activities as against the goals of your non-profit or social enterprise organization. So for a fundraising and financing plan to be successful, we also need to put in place adequate monitoring and evaluation. So our activities, our results must be measured against the organizational goals. We must be measured against the amount of money. We must be measured against the amount of financing that we planned to bring into the organization. Let me just close this class by saying that when it comes to sourcing for funding for the non-profit sector, there is an abundance of resources, quite an abundance of it, all over the world. It only takes, a good understanding of the process, and that is why we talked about research. When you're doing your strategic analysis, that is an opportunity for you to do research into your sources of funding. There are, more than enough organizations, more than enough individuals on the face of the earth that are ready to help you to, finance your non-profit or your social enterprise organization, and at the same time, there are, sufficient individuals, who have sympathy for what you want to do. But to arrive or to get the attention of such donors and financiers, you need to apply, the proper processes in doing that. And part of that is putting in place a functional fundraising and financing strategy to which, like I prescribe, we prescribe at Peniel Doxa Consulting, should be for a minimum of 5 years, better still for 10 years. I just hope that this brings some light into your processes as an organization. Thank you very much. See you in the next class.